Hey guys, today we're going to remake Gifted Every Strength by Loathe, and it's going to sound like this. So a couple of months ago, I put out a video about the incredible guitar tones on the last Loathe album, and you guys seem to like it. So as soon as this track dropped, I knew I had to figure these sounds out because this is on a whole different level. I have never heard tones like this anywhere else, and what just really amazes me about this band is that their music is clearly very heavily processed, but it always sounds somehow 100% organic and like a band. That balance is a difficult one to achieve, but this band just always nails it, so let's dive into it all today and figure out what they might actually be doing to get the sound we're hearing in this track. But before we jump in, if you like these videos, you may want to go check out my Modern Metal Pro course in the description. It's over 7 hours of me just explaining every single step in the process of making a modern metal track in complete depth, so if you want to take your music to the next level, go check that out. But with that being said, let's jump in, and we're going to start with that big snare and kick thing in the intro right before everything kicks in. We start with a big snare and like a little flam, and then straight kicks. The kick sound in this track is insane, but we'll talk about that in a second, and 2 snares at the end. And that's going to drop straight into the drum beat, which is going to be straight crashes like that. Snare hits. And then we have this stomping 6/8 groove on the kick. So for these drums, I'm using Modern and Massive 2. Big thank you to GGD for hooking me up with this beast. And I mainly just want to focus on the kick drum here because this is a super important part of the sound that we have to get right. So you can see here on my kick, I just have like a massive high shelf boost because we need that slappy frequency coming through to make sure this really cuts through the mix. And this will make a bit more sense in a minute. So let me show you this with it off and on. You can hear that just helps the kick jump out the mix a bit more. And I think we could cut some mid-range here as well. And I'm also going to add a little bit of reverb to this kick. I don't usually do that, but I feel like I can hear a bit of that roominess in this kick. So let's just dial that up a little bit. Especially in the intro of this track, I feel like I can hear that roominess around the kick here. So that's our GGD kick, which has that high-end slap that we need, but that is really only half the equation with the kick. What really amazes me about the kick sound in this track is that it has this insane low end that reminds me more of like an aggressive hip-hop kick than a metal kick. So I tried a few things to get that sound out of the GGD kick, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that I think the band might be layering a hip-hop sample here with their kick drum sound to get that low end. So I've decided to go with this sound from the U-Jam Dope kit. Like a very hard gangster rap kind of sound. And so I'm just going to mirror exactly what we're doing with our metal kick here so that we just layer these kicks together like this. Just listen to how that elevates the kick drum. Here it is without that. And then with the hip hop kick. It just doesn't have that relentless stomp if it's not got the hip hop kick in there. So that's basically holding down the low end and that boomy mid range while the metal kick is kind of handling more of the metal slap sound that we're used to. Okay, now let's focus on the bass because for the guitar tone in this track to work, it is crucial that we nail the bass first. They're going to work together. And to me, the bass tone in this track doesn't sound anything like what we're used to in modern metal. It sounds more like a kind of classic fuzzy Black Sabbath kind of Queens of the Stone Age bass tone. Like it's overdriven, sure, but not in the same way that we're used to with modern metal with the kind of clanky, metallic, high-end sound. And it makes sense that the band has gone with this kind of bass tone because the guitars are going to be so wild and out of control. So the bass needs to be more subdued to kind of hold down that low end and low mid-range and kind of tie everything together without it just getting like completely chaotic. So let's get it laid down, then we'll break down the tone, or tones, since I have 2 working together here. So for the bass guitar, we have two tracks here. The first one, I guess, is more like the conventional bass guitar tone, and the second is more like a distortion track. So for the first one here, the more kind of standard one, I'm using the Mark Studio 2, just like a very solid kind of standard bass amp, like a rock kind of bass sound. I'm pretty much loading that up and just leaving it like that. But after that, I have an EQ where I'm filtering out all the highs that we don't want and then just kind of shaping the tone a little so it becomes this. Just a little more growly in the bottom end, but still nothing crazy, because the crazy part comes now. The important part about this sound is kind of that fuzzy, Sabbathy kind of tone, and to get that, I'm going to use two distortions. Firstly, the Sansamp Bass Driver clone by Modern Music Solutions, so that's going to turn it into this. So that just gives us that little bit of high mid-range grit that we need. So that's kind of dealing with the higher part, but the real key here is the fuzz, which is just going to kind of destroy the whole thing and make it all very distorted. So I'm going to use Wave MDMX fuzz. Let's dial it up. That's so nasty, and that's not only there to make it sound cool. You hear how it kind of makes it more consistent. It pushes the bass so that it's just this smooth, distorted tone that doesn't drop. The volume isn't really dropping, it just stays there the whole time. We need that for the low-end presence in the mix. So that's sounding awesome to me, but it's still kind of lacking a bit of that Queens of the Stone Age fuzzy high mid-range for me. And that's where this second layer is going to come in, which is going to be quite a bit simpler. So I'm just going to copy that audio and put it here on the second track. And since we want more of a Queens of the Stone Age kind of sound, the trick they're known for doing with the bass guitar is running it into a tiny little guitar amp. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to use this Lead 12 Marshall amp by Audiority to get this sound. Just a bit more high-end noise for the bass guitar, so if we bring that into the mix, it just makes it feel more nasty with it still being subdued and not coming up front and getting in the way of the guitars we're going to lay down. So we've nailed our drums, we've nailed the smooth but aggressive bass sound. Now we've got the perfect foundation to put these insane guitars on top of. So let's focus on that now, and this is where it gets complicated, but stay with me because this is where I have some really cool outside the box techniques to show you for getting this kind of sound. Nothing about this band is predictable, so we can't just use the standard tricks here. We've got to think outside the box. So the first step is going to be single coil pickups. It definitely sounds like single coils for me, you know, with that spanky kind of clarity that we're used to with Loathe. So I'm using my coil split to make this a single. And if you thought I was crazy for splitting the bass into two tracks, here we're going to be splitting the guitar into three separate tones that all layer together to give us the sound that we want. So for the tuning, I'm in drop C sharp. The band may have tuned all the way down to low C sharp, but I think that it's regular C sharp with an octaver. It sounds like it to me. And for the first of these guitar amps here, I'm using the Morgan Amp Suite by Neural. Maybe a surprise for some of you that I'm going lower gain here. I do have the overdrive on here, boosting the tone a little bit before the amp, so it's going to have a little bit of grit. But this tone is going to be all about the clarity, so we do actually want to keep it kind of low gain so that we're not like destroying the whole dynamics of the performance. And other than that overdrive, I'm basically leaving this thing as is. Like, I'm not really touching it, just loading up the amp. But the important thing is going to be what I'm putting in front of the amp, which firstly is the thing that you always see on my channel, SS11X. And I talked about this in depth on the other Loathe video, but putting something like a preamp in front of your amp is very important because it helps to give you that kind of springy pick attack, and that's the important thing you need to hear with a Loathe kind of tone. You need to really hear the pick snapping into the strings. You need to hear that kind of bounce. So I'll turn this off and on, and hopefully you'll hear the clarity come alive more in the pick attack when I turn this on versus when it's off. So it's boosting the tone but not destroying that clarity with distortion. Very, very important step. But even more important is, of course, the octaver that we need. So I'm using KHS Pitch Shifter, free plugin, and we'll bring it down 12 semitones, 1 octave, and blend some of the main signal in. There you go. So obviously the octaver is a super important part of getting this sound. So we have that tone on the left and right. We have 2 more tones to break down, but first let's just get this tracked, and then we'll keep building the sound from there. left and on the right. Have you ever heard anything in your life heavier than that? That's the heaviest thing I have ever heard. Just like that second of the song is like insanely heavy. No one else writes riffs like that. Only Loathe can write a riff like that. Okay, and we are only just getting started with this tone. I'm going to take this audio and copy it like that onto our second guitar tone. I'm not going to be quad tracking here. Pretty sure it sounds double tracked to me, so we're just processing the same audio through different tracks. And for this second guitar tone, we basically want like a noise layer. Loathe always have this amazing balance in their guitar tones between clarity and distortion. And this is something I talk about in depth in the course, but clarity and distortion are kind of the two important parts of any heavy guitar tone, and they are like complete opposites. So it's very hard to achieve a good balance of the two, but Loathe nail it better than anyone. And this is one trick I think I'm hearing in this track. So they have a lower gain tone first, handling the clarity, and then this high gain noisy distortion layer. So we're making it so that the clarity and the insane distortion can coexist perfectly here. So for this one, I'm using an Archetype Gojira. We basically just need a high gain amp, so this is a good one to use. And we have the octaver, of course, so we're getting a lot of that low octave. But the trick here is going to be turning off the cab. Now this is totally a Trent Reznor thing. He definitely did this first, and I'm almost certain I can hear them doing that on this track. And when you turn off the cab, you just get this wild, untamed distortion like you just heard. But I do have an EQ after the amp where you can see I'm filtering out all the top end because it gets very, very harsh. I'm making a couple of other moves in the mid-range. Don't want any of these lows in the guitars, of course, but the important step here is that I'm filtering out all the highs so we don't get this like insane harsh high end. So we're kind of smoothing it out. So it sounds very aggressive, but not like awful. So we have the first tone just focused on clarity. Then if we bring in our noise layer, that insane distortion just gives it the energy it needs in the mix without destroying the clarity of that first track. And if you think that sounds cool, wait for the third layer because this is the big one now. Right now it has the energy we want, it has the clarity we want. The only thing missing for me is just that insane low end growl. This like, you know what I mean with Loathe? They always have these tones that sound just impossibly low. So it kind of sounds like the track now, but it needs that weight under the guitars. So let's figure out how to add that now. And I've got these two tracks here that I've called growl, and I'm just going to copy the audio across again. So we're just processing the same audio through these three tones. And for this one, we're starting off with something you've already seen me do, just the Morgan amp, lower gain, preserving that quality. And I've got the overdrive on, boosting the amp again. But you can see here, I'm transposing the whole thing an octave down. So we're not blending in some of the higher octave. This one just wants to be all the way down as low as possible. So we're getting all of that low end growl. So that sounds cool, but it kind of just sounds like the first tone that we put together. So now is where we turn this into something else completely. And I tried a lot of different things to try and bring more of that like low kind of sound out of the guitar tone. At first I thought maybe it needs a fuzz pedal, but that just destroys all the clarity and we can't have that. So then I thought maybe it's like a ring modulator or some weird digital effects, but none of that was getting me anywhere. I tried just adding more amp gain, but that just gives you like a tighter sound, which we don't want. We need like a blown out type of distortion. So eventually what I ended up landing on, that I'm pretty sure is like the whole key to this kind of tone, is tube saturation, both in front of and after the amp. Let me show you. So firstly, in front of the amp, I'm going to use the black box saturation plugin, almost like a distortion pedal. So let's dial this up a little bit and listen to how it changes the distortion, how it gives us a bit more of that growl. Really listen to the way the distortion breaks up. This is just pushing it over the limit, so it just sounds blown out. So that's already taken the sound a lot closer to what we want, but the actual important step here is putting a saturation after the amp. And that is a very unconventional trick, but this just doesn't sound like they're using a certain distortion pedal or a certain type of amp distortion. It sounds like they're doing something really crazy to like mess up the sound after they've recorded it. Pretty ingenious. So I have this guitar bus down here called Low Guitars, which these two growl tracks are going into. And because we want the most insane blown out saturation sound we can get, I'm of course going to use Decapitator. Let's put it on punish mode as well. Let's just like whack up the distortion and kind of blend this in and see where we want to kind of settle. And do you hear how that doesn't like squash the guitar tone like an amp would or like a fuzz in front of the amp would? This is pushing it to the limit, causing that distortion to really break up, and because the note is so low, we can really hear like the sound wave breaking up. But you can still hear all the clarity in there. We're just really pushing it with the saturation. So now in the mix, let's bring that in and listen to that low end growl and how much this track just transforms the mix and gives you that impression that it is just insanely, insanely low and heavy. So those three guitar tones add up to give us this. Very unconventional tricks that we're doing to get this tone, but for me, this is what I'm hearing. This is what it sounds like they're doing in the track. And with that, we have done it, guys. That's everything I did to replicate the sounds we're hearing in this track. Once again, Loathe have shown us all that they are just completely in their own league with this stuff. So well done, Loathe, for basically reinventing what a heavy guitar tone can be. Like I said at the start, if you want to see a deeper dive from me that's going to walk you through every step of the process so that you are prepared to create pro metal tracks yourself, go check out the course in the description. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like. If you want more content like this, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.